Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. Really excited for my next guest. His name is Daniel Huffman. He is the co-owner of the Huffman Group and also Huffman Built. He has over 15 years of experience in construction and multifamily real estate. He's a Georgia general contractor with a degree in business science from Auburn University. Daniel has overseen the construction of over 200 units across new builds and rehabs. Based out of Atlanta, he runs a vertically integrated real estate company focused on high-quality projects, predictable cash flow, and long-term wealth creation, and brings a hands-on operator-first perspective shaped by decades in the field. Daniel, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You got it. So we're just talking, you're based out of Atlanta, but you spent some time down in Florida. You're talking about your wife, and it sounds like family is pretty important to you. But you grew up in your family business. And I heard a story about you where your dad basically farmed you out to the gutter installation crew when you were like 16.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in that environment?
Yeah, it was, we had a great childhood, maybe a little different than some others, but my dad was also a builder. So we've kind of been in real estate, for, all of my life. And, so he would bring us out onto the job site when we were pretty young, and he'd say, okay, son, here's how you shoot a level. He'd get up there and show me how to do it and go hold the stick and things like that. And we'd spend a couple minutes doing that. And then he'd be like, okay, now you get to go clean up the site. And so, he'd like farm me off and tell me to go do all these other things. And he would, I think one of his greatest joys was when I got my driver's license. He got me this beat up old Nissan pickup truck, and then I could run to Home Depot for him. So, he would like give me a list of things and you go, okay, go pick those up, and come back. And, like most people, sometimes it would be like 1 or 2 trips a day. So, it was a lot of fun. My dad, I'd say is, what I call a serial entrepreneur. He has background was in construction management or building science. And, but he did a lot of other things. He started an internet company when I was pretty young. He had, some involvement in some tech and, this like over the air fax machine that he, kind of invented with this other guy that was pretty interesting that you could use a printer for instead of a dedicated fax machine, which, way before my time, but apparently they used to be separate. And he sold the internet company, and then they kind of went back into real estate. So they've done hard money lending. I was involved a little bit with that. And then most recently after the downturn is where we kind of got more into the rental properties, which is what we're doing now. So, he did build an apartment complex that was in Auburn, Alabama, where he went to college as well. But it just recently got torn down like a few years ago. So I don't know, I guess it was there for 40 or 50 years. But yeah, we started picking up single family homes, 2008, 2009 timeframe. And I got out of college from Auburn at that very time and had not planned on working in the family business. But there were zero construction jobs available in 2009. Yeah. You're probably aware. Mm-hmm. I think we had a class of like 60 something people, and there was two women in the class, and they were the ones that got jobs with basically like civil working contractors, road working contractors. And I don't know of anybody else in our class that had a job coming out of college that year. It's pretty crazy to think. But yeah, came home, started working with the family, and we purchased up single family homes with a line of credit that we had. And I was involved in renovating them. And then basically we would rent them. And so we would kind of churn through this line of credit that we had. We'd go purchase 4 or 5 homes. And I mean, these were cheap homes around Atlanta. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but we were picking up like 4-sided brick ranches for $36,000, $40,000. And, we'd spend another like $5,000 or so getting it rent ready. And then we put a tenant in there. And, our model was basically we didn't want to have any more than 36 months worth of the rental payment in the house. So if we could rent it for $1,000 a month, that means we need to try to have $36,000 in the house.
Mm.
And once we had a tenant in there, we would send out a newsletter to some investors that we had, and they would basically invest in the individual house. They would invest what we purchased it for, and they'd get a first lien, just like a bank. It was a bank, it was a mortgage essentially, but it was interest only. And we would pay them 12% interest on their investment. And that's kind of how we grew our single family rental portfolio kind of from the beginning.
Interesting. There's a lot of moving parts there. And I can see how, growing up in that environment would be pretty exciting. I don't have a construction background, but I'm an investor myself too. And I went to school, came out, and there was very few jobs. But I was in computer information systems. But I came out earlier before you did. But now, like, I've got a tech company, and so there's some similarities there between your company and what you've done. And also, too, I remember 2 summers I worked on construction sites for Ryland Homes, and we were like assistant. What would they call it? GCs, I guess they called us, even though we weren't really GCs. But we just cleaned up. We'd do little small tasks. We'd make runs to Home Depot and stuff. So I enjoyed those summers during those years when I was in college. So it gave me a taste of what it was like to work out there, and it's a fun little community too. Like, everybody that's on the site, everybody hangs out together, busts each other's balls, and it just has a good time, but gets work done too, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's doing what they got to do, and sometimes things go wrong, but yeah, I've always had feeling like I'm being attracted to building. I flipped some houses as well. I did this. One of my favorite was a live-in fix. So I moved into it and renovated it while I was living there, and it just, you're living in a construction zone the whole time, but it's fun. It's just fun to do those things. You still like working with your hands?
I do. I don't do it as much as I used to. I'm more on a computer these days, but I've done some woodworking over the past and do still enjoy doing that some. I think it was really good because I got to grow up, and I think I could say just about every trade I've done a little bit of, maybe minus like some HVAC. But plumbing, electrical, roofing, just over the years we would pick up and do different things. And when we were younger, me and a buddy of ours used to drive around and go find homes that had gutters filled with leaves, and we'd just go knock on the door and offer to clean their gutters. And we made pretty good money doing it, man. We could charge $100, $150 or something and clean somebody's gutters in an hour or two. And so doing stuff like that and picking up little odd jobs. I ran a trim crew with me and another guy for a summer, and we did some trim work. That was fun. But you're right. It's a interesting community. Sometimes, like the time that my dad farmed me off to the gutter guy that summer, we'd finished up the house that they now live in, which is a pretty cool home. It was featured in the International Home Builder Show when it came to Atlanta back in the day. I think it was around 2000 or so. But yeah, I jumped in, and the things those guys do on ladders, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You learn to get comfortable on a ladder really high up pretty quick, or you don't fit that job description. So you need to be up 30 feet, and these guys are on these things and they're just like jumping around, from left to right to try to nail in the gutters and stuff. And you're bringing up these huge long pieces from either side. It was interesting. So, but I did that for about a summer.
Yeah, you learn all the different trades, but you learn their perspectives too, right? Because some GCs, they haven't done the trades. They maybe came out of school, right, and they had building science or whatever, and they never really got their hands dirty, and so they just know the management piece of it, but they don't really know. Maybe over time they learn, on the job, but like what good work looks like, right?
Yeah.
A trained eye can see a problem from a mile away, right? You can walk into a build and you can be like, that tile is way off, right? Like the edges are showing, and it's not square, and What's the thing that you think you picked up the most, that was the most helpful, just kind of having your hands in all these different trades and actually doing them with your own two hands, that helps you today to where you walk on a job site and you can be like, yeah, that's an issue?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that it was a combination of both the kind of like the books and schooling that I got for the construction management degree, but also having a lot of that hands-on experience beforehand that really helps. So yeah, I mean, I can walk in and definitely see some issues or see that somebody doesn't look like they're that experienced or doing something wrong pretty quickly. And I think that probably, a lot of that comes probably from my prior experience. Because I mean, after I started doing some of those, hands-on jobs, eventually I kind of started graduating to, okay, my dad would have a house. He would let me come in and manage, the finish schedule or something of it, right? So we would go through all the sheetrock and the tile and the flooring and all those kinds of things, and I would manage the subs. And so, without putting your hands on some of it, sometimes it's difficult. I mean, some things are obvious. There's a crack in the floor, like there's not supposed to be a crack in the floor. But that combined with the schooling, where I got to really dig deep into like the structural requirements, how things are supposed to be put together, how to really well manage a construction schedule, what a Gantt chart is, how do you schedule jobs out, all those kinds of things, critical path items. There's a lot of stuff that you learn through those programs that really helps. So I think the combination of those two has helped me, be able to jump in and catch things before they become too big of a problem.
Yeah.
Some people have a lot of field experience. They don't have the book experience. And some people have the book experience, don't have the field experience. So I think it's important that anybody that's interested in getting into, to be a project manager for construction or superintendent tries to get, both of those types of experience.
Have you ever been red tagged?
What is that? You mean like a stop job?
Yeah,
like
the building department comes in, they're like, man, this is not to code, or like something that wasn't permitted. And so they came in, and that's what they call it around here, is red tag, when the building department comes in and they're like, all right, stop the work until we fix this.
Yes, we have. I'm trying to think. So when we were renovating those houses, some of the stuff that we were doing was not like super extensive. So many times we didn't go pull a permit. And technically I think we probably should have. And so we got caught a couple times doing that. In fact, I think back in that time frame, I didn't actually have my Georgia's contractor's license. So I got that when we started a townhome project. I went and did the paperwork and everything. And there's a couple different classes in Georgia, so I was able to qualify for the GC Unlimited license. So that's been good.
Nice. Yeah, there's some people just have horror stories, like just short timelines, cutting corners, like trying to stay under budget. So like they do things on the down low, right? Hoping they won't get caught, but then it ends up costing a lot more in the long run and going way over time and budget. So I just heard horror stories from builders about that sort of thing.
Well, I would say for people that are not builders who are hiring a builder. So my older brother's an attorney and he deals with some of these things in his practice, but he's seen way too many people who have hired somebody that actually was not licensed. So I would just really encourage anybody that is doing, a good amount of work in their house. I'm not talking about if you're having somebody come paint, right? But if you're moving walls or, doing extensive work or building a new home, go look up online. You can look them up, make sure that person has a license in the state to do what they're doing for your house, and that they're not using somebody else's license, which happens very often.
Common.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to do that, to make sure they're not using someone else's license? Like, do you have to get IDs and like compare? Like, how do you check that?
Well, so I mean, there's, in Georgia, the Secretary of State has a website that you can go and search their business name, basically, right? So you could go do that, or you can ask them for a copy of their business license and their contractor's license. So they should have a business license in the state with an LLC or however they're operating, and they need to have a contractor's license as well. And so for us, basically your contractor's license qualifies your LLC that you have, Huffman built, in our case, LLC, to be a contractor. And then when you go apply for a permit, that's the information you put down. And I think most states are like that. So, but yeah, there's way too many people who are, that, and I'd say insurance. So like, those are the two big things. Make sure they're licensed, and make sure that they've got liability and workers' comp insurance. So they need to have a builder's risk policy if they're building something for you guys. But yeah, don't take this like. The other big one is that they will go to you and say, oh, well, you as the owner, you can permit the project yourself. And what they'll do is they'll have the owner go and apply for the permit, because in many states, there's an owner build provision that they allow, right? And then they'll let the GC do the work. And the problem is that if you get into a lawsuit or something occurs, it can get really hairy. This is the easiest way to say it. You can run into a lot of problems.
Yeah. That's the thing with this. Like I said, there's so many moving parts. You were talking about, managing a build, the timelines, the budget, the people, and everything's got to fit together like seamlessly. And that's just when you look at just one build. And so I read that you guys are vertically integrated, which means you even go beyond that. So like on your new construction, you do everything from initial zoning to entitlements, and then you go way past the end of it, and you guys do property management too. And in an industry where like so many companies are just outsourcing their headaches, why was it important for you to keep the construction and the management, like the whole A to Z, underneath one roof?
Yeah, I don't know that we started and really realized that that's exactly how we wanted to do it, but we've kind of worked into that portion of it. I mean, we've always had the construction background, and to be honest, my parents had the property management side as well in their background, from the apartment that they had in Auburn. But I'd say they got burnt. This is probably where it came from. So they hired a third-party property management company for the apartment complex that they had in Auburn, and they had a really big issue. They came in back then. The units were furnished, and they essentially, I think they bought new mattresses for all of the units in the entire complex and never got approval for it from my parents, and got given basically a huge bill. And I think that in some other instances where they kind of got burned with property management companies, they decided they weren't going to ever do that again. And so we've essentially managed our own, I think because of that, somewhat out of necessity, and because we think that, it's difficult to find people who will treat things in the same way that you would as an owner. Now, when you get to large assets like, 100 to 300 unit apartment complexes, I think there's a lot of property management companies out there that do a really good job that would probably do better than an owner who doesn't have a great background in that, right? But it's for some of the smaller complexes, and also this single family rental kind of product wasn't as well known, or as big back then when we first started. You got 10 units. It's hard to find a property management company that's going to treat those like you would as the owner and give them as much attention as you would. So I think that's kind of what bore that process out. And as far as the getting entitlements and items like that, and my dad's told us from a very young age that you make your money when you buy the land, or you make your money when you purchase it. And I know that there's some caveats to that. Obviously, it's not a hard and fast rule, but he's basically saying your basis is set when you purchase it. So if your build cost is, not going to vary wildly, then, if you can get the land cheaper, that's how you're making movements. And so we see such a big jump in value when I look at existing land that's entitled for, 100 or 200 multifamily units, right? That we decided, wait a second, I think we need to try to find the land and entitle it. We know how to do that. It's not that difficult, right? And so we'll go find a piece of land. The project we've got coming up is in Carrollton, Georgia, which is outside of Atlanta. It's on the west side. It's a little college town there. And we found 12 and a half acres, and we took it through the zoning process and got it approved for 170 units. And so this project that we've got coming up it's It's called cottage style build for rent. And for those who aren't familiar, this build for rent product type has come about kind of through COVID. It's become very popular. People wanting to rent basically a single family home. So people would build a neighborhood of single family homes and just rent them all, which doesn't really look any different than a neighborhood where you buy homes. And so since then, the build for rent product has kind of morphed into some different types. So like you got townhomes that are for rent, right? And then this cottage style product is basically a small home, right? They're kind of like put together very close to each other, and they're similar, I'd say, in type to a townhome, but you don't share walls. And we even have some cool product types in there. So we have a more typical unit, layout of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom units, versus a typical BTR is all going to be like 3, 4 bedroom unit types, right? Full single family homes. And so we have like a stacked 1 bedroom unit that's technically a duplex, right? So it's a 1 bedroom unit on the bottom and a 1 bedroom unit above. And they both have a little front porch on them, and they look like a cool little 2-story cottage. And then we have some others that are like a 2 bedroom unit. They're about 1,300 square feet. And then we have a 3 bedroom unit. And so we've taken those and kind of scattered around on the site. We've tried to front them out on the green space. So that's another thing we try to do in our new developments. And then we like to use alleyways for parking whenever we can. And so, basically you start creating what used to be more like a typical neighborhood back probably in like the 50s and 60s. You've got front doors that are facing out towards green space. It kind of brings everybody out. They can, meet their neighbors. And then the parking and everything is kind of back behind it.
Got it. And so this is that concept that you've talked about before, which is like the missing middle, right? So it's in between.
It is, yeah.
The huge suburban areas, and then like the dense, cold, like high-rise living. Like this is in the middle someplace, and it brings people together, right? It builds a sense of community, and I'm thinking that people stay longer, right? Where in some of these other places where they don't build a community and they're living in just a normal house where they're isolated and siloed, they don't feel like there's any reason to stay there. So they'll just move from house to house to house. But you might have people staying for years because now they've got, extended family with the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we think this is a really great product type for a lot of reasons. And so, you take your typical garden style apartment, you got people above, below, beside you, right? So you run into a lot of noise issues. You're up and down stairs if you don't have elevators. You can't take your dog out, right, directly out to the grass where he can go to the bathroom. You're up and down stairs or elevators to do those kinds of things. You're not getting to know your neighbors as much because there generally is not as much screen space around. And so what we've really seen, and this is, I think, a lot of post-COVID that's pushed people further out so that they can have a yard. They want to have more space in their unit so they can work from home. And so this brings a lot of those same types of things together. And so, we've got some are duplexes. So you have one shared wall, right? Or little small standalone units. And they each have, some units have got a double car garage, some don't. We've got a lot of different price points. So our 1 bedrooms they're 750 square feet. They're starting around like $1,400. And the 3 bedroom goes up to, like $2,400 a month. Double car garage, 1,500 square feet. So, you've got a broad range of price range. You're meeting a lot of different needs. You may have, empty nesters who are downsizing from their house. They want a 2-bedroom unit. They don't have to take care of their yard anymore, right? They can travel more. They can go see their kids if they're somewhere else. Then you might have young professionals that are coming out of college, recently married. They've got 1 kid. Like, you may have a divorcee. You may have, it fits so many different product types that we bring into this community. And there's so many of these groups that, let's say, lived in a single family home once, right? Who are never, unless they absolutely have to financially, going to go rent in a garden style apartment. Like,
Right.
let's just start thinking about people like, oh, I've lived in a single family home my whole life. You know, my husband's died, he's passed away. I need to move somewhere else. I don't need to go to assisted living yet. Where are you going to go? You're not going to go to a garden style apartment. Like that's not where you're going to go.
Right.
You're going to go rent, you know, a small house or townhome or a unit like this, most likely. And so we think it fits so many different price points and demographics in such a great way.
Yeah. Yeah. And then because you transition from buying houses that were all scattered around and then you're renting them out. So you have, you know, the complexities of managing those people because they're all over the place, right? And now everything's contained in one area. Are there scales of economy there in the management when all the properties are on one site?
Oh, for sure. Managing scattered site single family rentals is a challenge. It just is. Even we've got properties that are, you know, like pretty close to each other. We may have two on one street and things like that, but they're still scattered out around Atlanta. And so, I mean, we've got we have maintenance guys who put, I don't know how many miles on their car a year. It's an incredible amount. So having, you know, 50, 100, 200 units in one single place, it essentially becomes an apartment complex. And so we'll have full-time maintenance staff, full-time leasing staff for this property. But we did complete a smaller one, which was a townhome community. It was almost 50 units. We don't have full-time staff for leasing there. We have a maintenance guy who's there most days that picks up a lot of the items there. But we've just there's whole strategies around how to manage single-family rentals. We went to basically self-guided tour process with a lockbox recently with a company called Rently. Prior to that, before those options were around, we had a lockbox. They had to call in. They had to send us a copy of their ID. We had to give them the code over the phone. And in rough areas, we had an alarm system in there, so we had to disarm the alarm. They had to go in the home, look at it, give us a call when they came back, when they were done, so we could rearm the alarm. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on with single-family rentals that is difficult because you just don't have the same. You just can't look over them in the same way. You're on site with 50 units, like you can walk around and you know what's going on. You can see all the exteriors of the units. You can schedule inspections where you're doing multiple units at a time. And so that's why you've seen so many of these large, private REITs or private equity firms who are purchasing up, thousands and thousands of single family homes begin to switch to this build for rent model because it was so much easier to manage.
What do you think about the concept of either giving or reducing the rent for on-site management or maintenance people when they live on site? Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
We've gone back and forth on this a couple different times. I do see a lot of companies, large companies, Greystar and different property management groups that will give incentives for managers to live on site. We haven't done it a lot. And now we have done the police car, the policemen. We've given discounts to policemen who live on site. We do think that is helpful, especially in certain areas. But the discount for the property managers, we found that our property managers are happier if they're off site. And the reason being is that if the managers are on site and everybody knows it, guess what happens? It's Saturday and somebody wants something and they go knock on their door, right? Yeah. And, not everybody wants that, that kind of environment and for their tenants to be able to get in contact with them that easily. So, we put processes in place for people to be able to submit their work orders online, with photos. We have an answering service that we work with that handles any of the weekend phone calls, right? And they have a protocol basically to let us know if there's an emergency that's occurred. So water leaks, fires, things like those, and they'll call us directly if those things occur. And then otherwise, we get an email with something that we can handle on Monday morning. And so those kinds of things have helped us handle some of those situations and allowed our property managers to keep their sanity, I guess.
Yeah. That's the trade-off, though, because if they're in the situations where people like that and they're willing to take the discount, like they kind of understand that's what they're signing up for, right? Like, okay, I'm getting a discount on my housing. I don't have to worry about this. So basically, I'm making more money for the headaches of people knocking on my door on a Saturday, right? So, but it takes a specific kind of person to want to endure that. So it's not for everyone.
Want to do that.
Yeah.
And then we've also run into issues where we're not so happy with our property manager, and so we want to replace them. Well, guess what? Now that they're renting in my complex, they've got a 12-month lease or something, right? So if I get rid of them, they've lost their income source. So then I'm wondering, okay, are they going to make their next payment, their rental payment? They may or may not. We've had to literally evict property managers that we've gotten rid of because they stopped making rent payments. And so that's another situation that's not ideal in our minds.
Yeah.
So
I've heard of them being sneaky too. Again, it's not everyone, but I heard a story where one of their on-site managers was leasing properties at a discount to family members or letting them live for free. And so they weren't maximizing rent or like enforcing the rules of the community because they were there and it's just easier for them to manipulate the game.
yeah, that's we see all kinds of different stuff when we take over a property. And so our property management company called Simply Rent manages our properties as well as third-party properties, mostly in like the Atlanta kind of area where most of ours are at. And we stopped taking payments in person, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And we run into a lot of properties now that are still taking cash or all kinds of different payments in person. And that is just asking for a problem. We took over a property, it was about 45 units or something, and the owner knew that the existing property manager had been taking payments for herself and not booking them, right? And so he got rid of her, and we tried to put somebody else in place. But it was just a nightmare, man, trying to get through some of those things, because then you file eviction on somebody and then you go to court and the person was like, well, I paid.
Right.
Here's my little slip or whatever, but it never got put in the system. And we're sitting here thinking like, okay, well, here we go. This is where the prior property manager took the money. And so, then we've got to like go through the process of like refiling again on them. It gets to be a nightmare. So, we don't accept payments like that. They have to be ACH, or they have to go, to these one of these different locations like CVS, Walmart, different things. They can pay their cash there and goes directly into our account. Takes the accounting work off the property manager, so they don't have to deal with that portion of it. And then another thing to do with the applications is we don't allow the existing property manager to have the final say on the acceptance of applications. And so this takes out that very thing you're talking about. If they don't have the final say, they can't put somebody in place that's a friend of the family or something that doesn't really qualify. And so they do all the legwork in the beginning for the application and gathering all the information. Then basically somebody in our back office looks over everything and makes sure that it's there before approving the person.
Yeah. Property management is one of those things that so few companies get right. And it's why like investors who buy rental properties, it's just always a challenge. They're always switching property management companies. They can never find the right one. They're either too big or they're too small to care. So like that sweet spot in the middle, like you said, those 10 unit area for many small, companies where they have multiple properties, but not large enough to where they can go to the big companies and use them. It's just a challenge for them. So just tons of nightmares with that. But You spend a lot of your time, doing construction now, and you're doing the build to rent communities, which I love that concept. I've been hearing a ton about that recently. I had somebody on the podcast just a week or so ago doing something very similar in a different
Hmm.
state. So it's becoming more popular, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of it is just driven by what's going on in the world, right? The way that, like you said, a lot of it was COVID changed a lot of things for people, right? And how we view things. So I think that's a really cool way of consolidating costs and profit centers and putting everything in one place, vertically integrating. Like, it sounds like you
Yeah.
guys have an amazing company over there. What's next for you guys? Are you going to continue just to expand? You said you maybe were going to be doing some stuff in Florida.
Yeah. So we've got this one that's 170 units that we're hoping to start here this spring. We've got two more lots. One that we're partnering with another group that's in Tuscaloosa, and it's 20 acres. He did some work on outparceling the front to. He's got McDonald's and a couple other groups coming in to buy some outparcels, and there's 15 acres in the back. So we're trying to put together basically the same concept, and as this development, this cottage style BTR, and kind of replicating it in as many places as we can. So we've got two more sites that we think will be a good fit. So that one in Tuscaloosa, and then I put a lot in Freeport, Florida, which is just north of Destin. So Destin's kind of like this long peninsula. You've got a bay that kind of sits behind it, and if you cross the bridge kind of north, you run into Freeport. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the U.S. There's basically the running out of land along the kind of coastline where Highway 98 and everything's at, and it's pushing people, in lower income ranges, basically, that are servicing a lot of the jobs down here further north. And so Freeport's had a lot of growth, and we've got 20 acres there that we're going to do, similar. It's off of Highway 331, which is the main highway there. So we're going to outparcel the front to some commercial pieces, and then we're going to take the 15 acres in the back and try to do some residential. So, these are pretty large projects. Some of the stuff in the past we've done kind of internally, and for these we're using outside, investors for a good portion of the equity. And so that's been something new for us over the past couple of years. I've kind of had to put on the investor mindset, trying to advertise and find groups that are interested in partnering with us to do these larger projects.
Very cool. So is that done through like a fund, or are they buying parts of an LLC, or how are you raising the money?
Yeah, so we do it kind of through the normal syndicated model. We'll have an LLC. They'll hold limited partnership ownership in it. Then we'll be the general partner, and there'll be kind of like preferred returns and splits basically for each project.
Very cool. Okay. Well, for anybody listening who is looking to invest with the Huffman Group and doing some different projects, how can people reach you, Daniel?
Yeah, so they could email me at daniel@huffman.group, or they can go to our website, huffman.group. There's a contact page there. They can reach out to us. We've got full offerings. We're just about raised on the one upcoming, but there's still some room available on that one. And then we'll have these next two projects over the next year or so that we'll be trying to start. So this past one was about a $4 million raise.
Okay.
And the next two will probably be something similar.
And then what's the timeline for somebody who wants to invest in that? Like, is this like a couple year long project?
Yeah. So, we've done similar deals with existing multifamily, and we do sometimes still purchase existing multifamily if we find a deal. But those have got existing cash flow coming off from them, right? And so generally you're buying those, and the investors are coming in, and pretty quickly thereafter, they're starting to get some monthly cash flow or quarterly kind of distributions. The new construction is a little different. Now the returns are generally higher, right? But they'll invest money. We'll get a construction loan. We'll start the process, and it's generally a year and a half or so before we start getting any cash flow from units that have finished that we started renting up. And so generally it's about a 3-year time frame for investment before we can get the property stabilized and then, refinance it or sell it. Sometimes we'll refinance with like Fannie and Freddie basically, or an agency type loan, or we'll put it up for sale.
Got it. Very cool. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. You guys reach out to Daniel if you want to get involved in any of his projects that he's working on. But to kind of just wrap things up, like this family business that your dad started way back when, I mean, you guys have seen the complete arc of building over decades, right? And it being a family business, right? There's more of a personal touch to this business than somebody who's just operating, some, private equity company, right? So like in 50 years, when people living in a Huffman community or a Huffman built home, like what do you want them to think about the company and your family?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We from the very beginning have tried to provide a safe, well-built or well-maintained community for, all of our renters, not dependent on price range. So we really concentrate on trying to, reach back out to people and get maintenance orders fixed quickly in a timely manner. We just the whole concept and how we proceed things is trying to envision, ourselves living in that home and what we would like to see. And in our new product, the same way. We've done a lot of stuff. Many of our projects in the past have used energy efficient, kind of methods of construction, trying to reduce energy use. And ultimately just, a company that stewards their assets, like they were our own, like we were living in them ourselves. And so, our customer is the renter. And so trying to do everything we can to make them happy, not only, increases our returns, but, keeps them in there, keeps them renewing year after year. We have some tenants that have been in some of our properties for 6, 7, 8 years. And so, I'd say 50 years from now, we just want to continue to grow on that concept and trying to really grow, build communities now that we're doing build for rent. These types of communities that are thriving and, really create great community for all the residents that are in there. And hopefully decent returns for investors and ourselves.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time. We learned a bunch about you and your company and some of the cool projects you're working on. So you guys reach out to Daniel, connect with him, get involved in some of his projects. And Daniel, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
You got it. And everybody, thank you for listening to this edition of the REI Hacker podcast. Keep an eye out for more amazing guests like Daniel in the future, where we talk about real estate and entrepreneurship and business and wealth generation. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
That's a wrap on today's Real Estate Revelations. Thank you for tuning into the REI Hacker podcast. Remember, every property has a story, and every deal is a lesson. Until next time, keep hacking the real estate world.